Hey, what is up guys, it's Lewpac here, back with another Albion Online video for you. Today's video we're going to be taking a look at one of the biggest upcoming features of the Rise of Avalon expansion for Albion Online, and it is of course the Roads of Avalon. Some people also refer to them as the Mists of Avalon, but either way we're going to tell you all about them. Just to pre-warn you, this might be quite a long video, but it will be packed with detail, and this will cover absolutely everything you need to know about the Roads of Avalon for the upcoming expansion. Just a quick note guys, before we get into the bulk of the information on this video, if you are enjoying my Rise of Avalon update preview content, if you've enjoyed the beginner's guides, or you're just watching this video because you ended up here, if you enjoy it, please do consider subscribing to the channel. This helps me immensely with the YouTube metrics and algorithms, helps my channel get discovered, and also helps more people discover Albion Online as a fantastic MMO to play. I really do appreciate everybody for taking the time to watch my channel, so let's get on with it. So firstly then, what exactly are the Roads of Avalon? The Roads of Avalon are an area or collection of areas that are designed to give end-game content to small groups and guilds. These are designed for people that want to escape the Zergy gameplay, the alliance politics, and just focus on much smaller group play while still having access to all of the best end game content. Now, the Roads of Avalon is a collection of zones, but it's not a single place, it's a group of places. And it's kind of hard to explain simply how it is, so I'll probably aid it with some diagrams. The Roads of Avalon is 350 new zones to be precise. They follow the Black Zone rules, and they exist separately from the rest of Albion. So currently we have the Royal Continent, we have the Outlands, and now we're going to have the Roads of Avalon too. And the Roads of Avalon provide continuous links between the Royals, the Roads, and the Outlands. You can bounce all over the place through the roads, but the catch is this: the pathways are never consistent. The pathways are connected to each other and the main world, but the links are randomized and they're ever changing. They don't reset once per day like many of the content in Albion Online. These are consistently resetting and switching the pathways up, so it's very hard to keep track of, and as you're going to find out in this video, for a number of reasons it's hard to move any sort of large force through the roads, and it's very hard to find a specific target. A very common misconception with the Roads of Avalon is that the 350 tiles are like one continuous labyrinth, and once you're inside the Roads of Avalon, you can constantly explore, and you can find the whole thing via one entrance. And this is actually completely untrue. The areas are randomized, and luckily for you guys, I'm very skilled at technical drawings, so I'm going to do a very high-tech diagram for you guys to try and explain what I mean. So let's put some squares on the map. As you can see, very professional drawings here from me, and we'll put some over here. Each of these squares represents a zone in the Roads of Avalon. So what will happen on any given day? Let's say day 1, when they spawn, the following links are available. So every line you see here is a linked path. So we have a cluster of 5 zones, we have 2 that are connected together, and we have 3 that are connected together here. So if you're inside this cluster of Avalonian roads, you cannot get to this cluster, or you cannot get to this cluster from inside the Roads of Avalon. Instead, we're going to need some royal zones. So these circles represent royal zones, and the lines between them represent normal pathways for normal royal zones, and between a circle and a square we have the Roads of Avalon. So what we can see here is to go from this cluster here to this cluster here, we have to zone out into the Royal Continent, go 2 zones, and then move into this cluster. You might even have a case, and I have tested this on the test server extensively for many hours, where there's a single Avalonian road zone with no onward connections other than the Royals. So you could have, for example, going into the Avalon, it's only one tile and every exit leads to the Royals. Of course, you might go there 3 hours later and it suddenly has a new connection. Likewise, you may go back to one you were in a few hours before and the connection's disappeared and there's a whole new link. So what I'm trying to explain with this diagram is that there's no set layout for the roads. It's constantly changing, and that's why, as you'll find out in this video, you have to make the decision to either live in the roads or simply explore them as they're presented to you. So I hope that gives you a little bit more of an overview of how the cluster system works. The biggest linked group of roads I have found so far is 14 consecutive road zones, like that you're able to travel within. And then I hit a dead end and I had to go back to the normal world in order to find a new cluster of zones. Now, of course, you're going to be wanting to explore these, see what resources are available, see what treasures available. But once you know a cluster is completely clear, you are going to want to search for a new cluster. So to summarize the intro, the roads of Avalon are a total of 350 new zones which follow the Black Zone rule set. It's not a single place or an interconnected maze. They're procedurally generated or randomly generated links to create clusters of roads which exist parallel to the normal world. As you explore, you'll constantly find yourself hopping back between mainland Albion and the roads of Avalon as each zone gets exhausted or mined out, and you'll be searching deeper and deeper. The deeper you go, the more chance you have of finding undiscovered and untapped treasures that nobody's got to yet. So now that we know what exactly the roads are, we need to talk about how we access them. So the road entrances, or gates as people have come to call them, exist all over the world, and they look something like this on the map. Now you will have noticed they come in 3 different colours or 3 different flavours. We have green gates, blue gates and yellow gates. Each gate has a capacity for players, and once that capacity is reached, no one will be able to zone until the capacity on the gate refreshes. The time you need to wait will depend on the type of gate you're waiting at, so green gates will have a refresh time of 5 minutes, blue gates have a refresh time of 10 minutes, and yellow gates have a refresh time of 20 minutes. And it's important to note that the refresh timer will begin when the first person goes through the gate. So when it's a 20-person gate, the time will have started ages ago. If you're sort of the 10th person to zone, the time will have been ticking from the time the first person went through. So you won't always have to wait the full duration to get your guys through a gate, but you do need to be aware of these timers as you move around the roads of Avalon. So for green gates, only 2 players can pass. For blue gates, only 7 players can pass. And for yellow gates, up to 20 players can pass. And hearing this, you can instantly see why it's difficult to move people through there in large numbers, because you don't have any control over which gates are where. The game controls that. So if a force of 40 people gets unlucky and gets bottlenecked into a zone with only green gates, to move 40 people through a green gate, you're going to wait 5 minutes every 2 people. You know, you're looking more than an hour to get those guys into the next zone. So it's not practical for moving a large force. Occasionally you'll be able to get 20 through a yellow gate, but from my exploration, the yellow gates are few and far between. The optimal group for moving around Avalon seems to be between 4 and 6 from my testing, because 4 people to 6 people don't get completely ruined by green gates, and there's usually plenty of blue gates to move a small force. The reason I don't recommend 7 is because you're waiting an extra tick at a green gate to get the extra person through, and also if one person has gone through a blue gate before you, your whole group has to wait 5 minutes. So 4 to 6 seems the best for quick travel around there. Of course, you may want to flood a zone that's got very high value targets, which we'll talk about in a bit, so you may be bringing people in constantly, but when this launches, the busiest guilds, if you're trying to go in en masse, expect a queue just to zone into any of the zones. Other than the gate capacity, there's 2 more systems that you need to know about. The first is the gate closure. So if you highlight the details of any gate, it will tell you when that gate closes. And of course, this is important because if you're planning logistics, if you're planning to go back and forth and bring all your stuff back out, all your treasure, all your loot from the roads back to your base, you're going to need to make sure that your exit home hasn't closed behind you. Now this is doubly important because from my testing, it does seem that the more people you move through, the quicker this goes down. So every time you hit capacity on a gate, the timer goes down a bit more. One final system you'll need to become familiar with is the free use system, or the bind system. When you zone through a gate, you'll be locked to that gate, or bound to that gate rather, for a set period of time. That period of time will match the refresh time for the gate. So for green gates, you get bound for 5 minutes, blues for 10, and yellows for 20. And what this means, the free use system, is during that timer, you won't use up any capacity of the gate if you go back and forth during that timer. That's to prevent one player repeatedly zoning back and forth and using up the capacity in order to block off pursuers or enemy forces. It's also very important to note that gates are directional. So if you zone out of a gate, you haven't used any capacity for the inwards direction. So if a gate has 20 people's capacity, it has 20 going out and 20 going in for a total of 40 travelers every 20 minutes. That's basically a system that's put in place so that small groups can't use up all the capacity on a gate and block people from coming through, and also so that defenders can't zone out to prevent people zoning in. Because of the one-way direction, they will only take up capacity on the outwards direction, so they won't be able to zone back in and use up capacity on a force that's trying to come into the gate. Now, this next portion you're going to want to listen to very, very carefully. This will be one of the most important things you learn in this video, and this will make your Roads of Avalon experience 10 times better. The gates themselves actually have some mechanics which provide you with a ton of information about the zones that you're traveling to. When you travel from normal Albion into the roads from the open world, you will know nothing about the zone you're going to. You're completely blind, and you're going to need scouts to scout out what the situation is there. However, once inside the Roads of Avalon, every portal you find will have a sequence of 3 rings. As you approach the portal, these rings will shift into a formation, and these symbols that light up will give you a bunch of information about the zone on the other side. If you're looking for a specific type of content, these will definitely be something you'll want to learn, so you'll know what you're getting and where you're going, and it will help you identify the most high value stuff without needing to scout too deep. So first we'll talk about the outer ring. I do have this handy cheat sheet here, which I will give a link to as well, so that you guys can have this for yourself. It's not completely conclusive, they did leave a little bit off, but I will explain everything for you in detail. So as I was saying, the outer ring then, this tells you the type of zone you're going to. The 4 circle symbols represent the mainland of Albion. This one represents the blue zone, this one represents the yellow zone, this is the red, this is the black. So if you're not familiar with the zone names on the map, this will help you know which type of zone you're going to be zoning out to. The other 4 symbols represent the 4 types of Avalonian zone that you can find. The first, the sort of cross symbol, represents the Avalonian Carrefour, which is like the interconnected roadways. This is the biggest sort of road tile and generally has the biggest number of exits. If you find one of these, you can guarantee lots of different pathways or zones to follow to. The next one, this kind of straight line with the circle, is the Avalonian Corridor. This is generally a one-way kind of path that you could follow, and there's a few points of interest like chests, resources off of the main road. Generally, most of these have some interesting stuff. The next one, this little loop, is an Avalonian Sanctuary. This is actually often a dead end, I've found, but you can find some quite decent stuff like Avalon Dungeons, plenty of resources, and mob camps. And then finally, this symbol, the Avalonian Rest, is a very important one. These are usually quite deep into a cluster. There's a maximum of only 1 other exit. So the most I've ever seen on the Avalonian Rests is 2 exits. And this is very important because this is the place where you'll find hell gates, and it's the only place where you can place a hideout. The hideout spaces are very limited. We will talk about this more in depth in the hideout section of this video, but this is the only place you can place hideouts, so this symbol is very important to find, especially early on in the expansion if you're looking to get a home in the Roads of Avalon. The second ring then The inner ring provides information about the tier of zone you're in. So the number of dots on the symbol indicate the maximum tier of the zone. And I say maximum because this symbol affects a couple of different things and you have to interpret it differently. So the symbol reflects firstly the max tier of resources. So if there's 6 dots, it means this zone will go up to tier 6 resources, and generally it has up to 2 tiers below the max. So a tier 7 zone will have 5, 6 and 7. And this is from my testing. It may not be a perfect rule, but it's been pretty accurate so far. So it tells you the max tier of resources, but it also tells you the tier of mobs that you'll fight. Again, some of the zones haven't correlated properly on the test server, but I believe they just need to be fixed up before the actual release. But if you've got 8 dots, that means you're in a tier 8 zone, and the mob camps should be tier 8. Also, static dungeons and Avalonian dungeons will follow the tier rule as well. If your group is only comfortable doing up to a certain tier of content, or you haven't got maxed out Reaver levels or something, this will help you find the right zones for you guys to farm. And farming in the Avalonian roads is insanely profitable and insanely powerful. Talking about groups then, the innermost ring determines certain things to do with your group size. Now, from what I've seen so far, this actually only affects resource mobs. So the treasure camps, the Avalonian mob camps, these aren't following the inner ring rules. The inner ring has 3 little kind of people symbols, one with 1 person, one with 2 little stick figures or diamond figures, and then one with a bunch of them. So the single one means the content is great for 1 or 2 people. You may need 2 people to clear some of the bigger mobs in the resource camps, but generally you'll be okay on your own with a strong build. The second one, the 2 little symbols then together, generally means sort of veteran things start to appear, and you're going to want 2 to 5 people to clear out the resource camps, because even with strong solo builds in 8.3 gear, I struggled with some of the veteran mobs. These aren't like mobs in the normal world. The veteran mobs here hit very hard. They've got a bunch of mechanics that are sort of anti-solo. I was able to bring a couple of them down, but we'll talk about them in more depth in the resource area. But this means you want a small group. Then the big symbol means you will encounter resource camps with a bunch of high-end mobs. I'm talking titans. These guys have got 400, 500,000 health, and they will need a bunch of guys to bring down. So this means if you're finding this symbol, this means you're going to want plenty of people, because the resource camps are going to be the best resources, but they're also going to be the hardest to bring down the resource mobs. Again, this doesn't affect Avalonian spawns. All of these symbols, I found all of the Avalonian spawns in those zones. There's no correlation between what size Avalonian mob camp you get and those symbols. However, these do massively affect the resource camps. This then leads us nicely on to talking about the resource areas in the Roads of Avalon. Gatherers rejoice because we've had a rough time since they introduced the rubbish 3-tick and 2-tick clusters or nodes at tier 7 and 8. Everybody's sick of finding 1 tick of resources, but gatherers have been saved by the Rise of Avalon patch. So as you traverse off the roads, you will find a bunch of resource mobs, but the main thing you want to be looking for are the little resource clusters. Now they will have the symbols that you're familiar with telling you what type of resource there is, and of course, because we now know how to read the gates, we know what tier of resources to expect, and we know how hard they're going to be. The resources then come in 2 sort of areas. You have these small little nooks, as you can see on this map. We have a leather and a ore nook, and we have these large cave areas. So there's 2 types. There's a cave and a cliff for the large zones. I'll give you a little shot at a cliff here as well, so you can see what they look like. And the resources are generally concentrated best around the symbol itself. So in this little nook, you'll see if we go in, we've got a bunch of ancient Mistcougars, tier 6, large veteran mobs which kill me very, very quickly. These guys have 9,000 health, which doesn't seem like a lot, but even in high-end armor, they will hit like a truck. We've also got ancient titanium elementals. Generally, you'll find veteran mobs of the core resource type, and then a few other smatterings depending on how lucky you are, plus a bunch of small mobs. You will need a group to take out some of these veterans, but the resources inside are fantastic. We found, you know, everything from tier 4 to tier 8, with up to 261 hits of resource in some of them. The small node areas are well worth checking out, and the big node areas are fantastic. The big node areas, or the big resource areas, these are where you're going to find titans, which are the aspect equivalent of the roads of Avalon. These guys have a ton of health, but they also carry a ton of resources. They come in sizes up to tier 8, and they can have all enchantment rates. So you can see here in this resource area, we've got T8 ore abound. We've got T7 golems that will have hundreds and hundreds of ticks. We've got a T8 golem in here. You know, this is a top end zone, and we've got the ancient adamantium titan. This is a boss that will take a bunch of you to bring down. He has 438,000 health, but he is tier 8, and he will have hundreds and hundreds of T8 units inside him. Get one of these, especially an enchanted one, and you and the gang are gonna get paid. They are not for the faint of heart. Unsurprisingly, they're difficult to bring down. People are gonna contest them, but with 350 roads of Avalon tiles, there's gonna be plenty to go round for the people who are brave enough to take them on. As I said, anything that's aimed at groups is very hard to solo in the roads of Avalon. Nobody's going to be soloing these titans, so make sure you call your friends. This is going to be like a high value target. If you find one of these, you're going to call everyone, which is super awesome. These resource zones do have static nodes, but generally you don't want to be in gathering gear until you've cleared the mobs. You're going to need to bring fighting gear because even the nodes are covered by resource mobs. There's a lot more resource mobs than there are static nodes, and you generally only find the nodes in the hotspot behind all the mobs. Unlike the main world as well, a lot of the things that were passive are now hostile. So resource mobs that you might have run past previously will all be hostile now. And you can find every sort of resource mob from tier 4, all the way to tier 8. And more importantly, there's veteran versions of everything with tons of resources in. So if you're somebody that isn't T8 gathering, don't worry. You can come here and you can find massive tier 4 mobs to gather and level up really, really quickly. On top of that, mobs have a special bonus that you gather them 50% faster because they're a mob type. So this is the ultimate place for power leveling your gathering level, power leveling your specs, and gathering huge quantities of valuable resources. Of course, it's the roads of Avalon, so you then need to get your resources back to either your road hideout or your main base or the city, so getting all of your goodies out there safe is going to be a big challenge. But this is what gatherers have needed for so long. This is such a big change for gatherers to finally find huge quantities of resource and just have a great time gathering again. Make it exciting again. That's what we needed, and I'm so excited for this portion of the roads. Next up then, we have the Avalonian Mob Camps which spawn around. This will be a brand new symbol that you're not familiar with, but this is another really cool feature of Avalon, and this is another thing that you're going to be finding on your day-to-day and contesting in the roads of Avalon. So these are mob camps with chests that are specifically populated with Avalonian mobs of various difficulties. Now, the tier of the mobs will be determined by the tier on the gate. As we said about reading the gates, you'll get a tier number. So if you go into a tier 5 zone, expect tier 5 mobs and so on and so forth. However, that's all we can determine. The size of the camps is determined by the symbol on the map, not the symbol on the gate. So the only thing that will tell you how many people to bring is the color of the chest. And then it gets even more confusing because the chests themselves have a rarity, but you can't see that rarity until you clear the camp. So you have the green boxes on the map. These are soloable, and I recommend for these, just bring a speed clearing build. Using the great axe or something, the quicker you are, the more of them you can clear, the less chance you get jumped, and the mobs are pretty simple. They're Avalonian mobs that you've seen before, plus a few new ones. I'm not going to spoil all the details of the mobs, I'll let you discover them, but green ones are for solos, and you can just blitz through them as fast as you want. The blue camps are for small groups. As we've said before, you know, it follows this same pattern. I'd recommend bringing between 3 and 6 people for these. A normal setup will be fine. The mobs aren't too difficult, but they do hit quite hard if you were trying to solo them. So you do probably want a tank, healer, and then a bunch of DPS. And then the yellow ones are designed for large-ish groups. So anything from 6 to 20 to clear these. And these are going to be more like Avalonian raid mobs. These will be the things you're used to from Avalonian Dungeons, plus the new mobs and bosses around the chests. You're going to need a proper setup. You're going to need decent-ish gear for the high-end stuff. But these are the ones for the bigger groups. As with the resources, they come in 2 sizes as well. We have small camps, which you can see these 2 yellow camps are actually small camps. And the bigger camps look something like this for this blue camp. So you have small and large, solo group and large group, and also the chests have a rarity. All of the chests will be white when you find them. The small camps, generally have 1 chest. The big camps can have 3 or 4 chests maximum, but all of the chests are white. You're required to clear a certain amount of the mobs around the chest before the chest will unlock, and when it unlocks, it will become the color of rarity. So you can't just run around looking for the best chests. You have to clear the mobs to discover how rare your chest is. The amount of loot will of course be decided by the size of the chest and the rarity combined. So you want to look for T8 big large camps. You don't know whether you're getting a green chest or a legendary chest. The rarities again are green, blue, purple and yellow for the legendary chests. And they don't look any different. They all look the same until the color is revealed. There's a few mechanics that you want to learn here as well. By clicking the chest, it will tell you how many more mobs need to be killed to unlock the chest. And also by clicking the chest, you will aggro all of the mobs linked to it. However, they may not run all the way to the chest because they may hit their leash range and run away. But if you're struggling to find the last couple of mobs, clicking the chest can be helpful. They will generally have a boss of varying sizes linked to the chest, plus a bunch of trash mobs around. Again, you'll get a feel for how tough stuff is, whether you can AoE pull it, whether you need to be careful. It does look like split pulling doesn't work anymore in the Rise of Avalon, so rip that strategy. I've been trying to do it unsuccessfully. Maybe they've tweaked it a bit, maybe it only works in Avalonian Dungeons, who knows, but that strategy does seem to be out the window. It's just a case of learning the mechanics of each encounter though, and getting your group comfortable clearing as quick as possible. The quicker you clear, the quicker you get out of there with the loot, and the less chance another group jumps you while you're trying to clear, because these are black zones, everybody's going to want the stuff, and it's going to be highly contested. You know, if you find a large group, large area in a T8, that's going to be like the pinnacle of the PvE for you, and you're going to be clearing that as fast as possible to discover what size chest you have there. Other than the mob camps, you can also find PVE dungeons in here. These will actually appear on the map as blue or green dungeons. These are the same randomized dungeons that you will find in the open world. However, when they're in the roads of Avalon, there are bonuses to fame and loot. So if you're running out of things to do, clearing one of these can still be good. You can also find Avalonian dungeons in the roads of Avalon for some Avalonception. These generally only can be found in the deep roads I've seen. The deep roads generally are a few zones away from the nearest royal entrance, and you'll get an achievement when you first go into one, so you'll recognize them a bit more easily. They genuinely have higher tier and more valuable stuff as well. These dungeons otherwise though behave exactly the same. You can also find the new corrupted dungeons around the Avalonian Rests is the only place I've seen them. But for you guys looking to do those and live in the roads, you're not going to be completely blocked off from other content. You'll also find Hellgate updates, so everything is available to people living fully inside the roads. We'll talk a little bit more at the end of the video about what life will be like for people living in the roads and out of the roads and how it will play out. But next we're going to go on to an important part of road living, and that of course is hideouts. So we've always known that you're going to be able to place hideouts inside the roads of Avalon. Because of the rules that we've seen so far, it's obviously not possible to move enormous forces easily through the roads. So these are going to be aimed honestly at guilds of like 20 to 40 people that want to place their hideouts. Now there's a few rules that you need to know about placing them that we'll go over quickly, and then I will talk about the differences between a roads hideout and a normal hideout that you would find in the open world, and give you all of the information you need to know. So, Avalonian rests are the only place you can place a hideout. Inside the rests, you will find a number of power crystals. It looks like there's 7 per rest from what I've seen, but obviously I haven't seen every rest on the entire server. And we know that there is a total of 56 rests out of the total 350 tiles. So 56 times 7 means there are potentially 392 places for hideouts to be placed. This might not be the exact number, but it's pretty close, I'm fairly confident. So as you can see, there's plenty of room for many guilds to make their home in Avalon. And because unlike the mainland, where you're worried about all of your neighbors, the only people you're really worried about as a guild living inside the roads of Avalon are people that live in your specific rest. Because you might have a bunch of guys in a rest that you're connected to that you don't really like, but the next day you might not be connected to them. You might not be connected to them, they might be 5 clusters apart. So you don't care about anything except what goes on inside your rest. So expect this a rest to be like a mini continent. You'll have 7 hideouts, guilds have their own little politics, their own stuff going on, their own naps and agreements and enemies, and there'll be like little mini wars in each rest. In order to place a hideout, you'll need to go to the specific rest at a prime time. You'll have noticed through the roads that the zones don't have a prime time like you would find in the Outlands, but the rests do, and these follow the normal rules. So if you go to a 15 UTC prime time rest, you can only place your hideout between 15 UTC and 19 UTC, the end of the prime time. You will need to bring a hideout kit into the roads, which is very heavy, so you'll need to probably find your path to a rest first, identify the spot, and then transport the hideout kit in. You probably don't want to run around aimlessly with a hideout kit looking for the perfect spot for your hideout, and you'll need to find one of the power crystals. A power crystal can only support one hideout, so once yours is down, then you're going to need to defend it for 20 minutes until it goes into phase 2. After it's hit phase 2, the hideout is then invulnerable until the next prime time. Then is the tricky bit. You're going to need to keep your characters in that zone for the next prime time, or at least keep a scout in there. Because this is the tough thing, and this is why the Roads of Avalon is so cool. We did some testing, right? On the test server, me and my guild, we placed a hideout down. We deliberately suicided back to town, and then we tried to find our hideout with no knowledge of the roads. We didn't use the same path as before because we obviously knew that, and we tried to find a new pathway back to our hideout. 2.5 hours later, we couldn't find our hideout. In the end, we logged in an alt character inside that hideout zone, used him to scout outwards, and it still took us another 35 minutes to get through because of the connections. So what I'm saying is, you cannot ever guarantee to find the same thing again because the roads are completely randomized. This is why big Zergs are not going to be able to hunt hideouts inside the roads. They can't move in groups efficiently. They can't even find the thing they're looking for without a lot of time and patience or scouts on the inside. And even then, the connections aren't guaranteed to hold. And it's going to be a completely different experience. One of my reservations about hideouts, obviously, is they're going to be a lot harder to take down because a level 3 hideout is very, very tanky, regens very fast. And with defenders, it's going to be really, really hard to bring one of these down with a small group unless you've got very nice hammers and you conclusively win the fight. Likewise as well, because your hideout is your only respawn point, you don't ever want to go back to town. Hideout camping could be kind of powerful. If somebody's camping on top of your hideout, you don't get a bubble for very long. There are some issues I could foresee with this, but we're obviously not going to see how it plays out until the live timer has arrived. So once your hideout's established, it follows all of the rules of hideouts in the Outlands. You can set permissions, you can upgrade it, you can build your crafting stations, your refining stations, and just get it up and running as your base in the Roads of Avalon. I recommend, if you're trying to live in the roads, that you never ever lose your home binding, because it's very hard to find your way back unless you have someone guiding you. And you really do need to commit to fully living in there. And we'll talk about the life in both in and out of the Roads of Avalon in the next section. Another thing that behaves differently is the attack system. So in the Outlands, to attack a hideout, you have to own the tower, and then you can declare the attack at the start of prime time. In the Roads of Avalon, anyone can declare an attack at the start of prime time because there's no towers. So generally, you do want to be around your hideout at the start of prime time in case somebody launches, especially when it's either under construction or level 1, because these are a lot squishier. An under construction hideout is very quick to destroy and only has the single life, and a level 1 hideout isn't that tanky and only has 2 lives. So you probably want to be about to at least defend it or keep an eye on it at the start of prime time until you hit level 2. Of course, if your small guild all has your home bindings there, you'll be able to come back and respond to stuff very, very quickly, hopefully. But you're going to see your own little politics in the zone. You might have 7 guilds in a rest that have all agreed not to gank each other or not to, not to destroy each other's hideouts. A little mini alliance, if you will. I expect to see a lot of that happening. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm thinking about starting up a little project with like 19 friends and just living in the roads for a few months to get the full experience once it goes live. But it's a cool system and it's going to be great to live in there. But you don't have the luxury of just being able to go back and forth between your guild hideout in the Outlands and your hideout in the roads. It doesn't act like a way station for people living on the outside because you could never guarantee access to it. So that brings me into the final section of this video, and that of course is how will it play out living outside the roads versus living inside. So as we said, if you live inside the roads, you're going to want to get a hideout. That's going to become your home, and every day when you log on, you'll be in your hideout in the Avalonian Rest, and you're going to basically explore outwards. From there, you're going to look for your points of interest with your guys. You're going to look for the mob camps, the good resource spots, dungeons, anything cool. And you're just going to farm in whatever way the roads present themselves from your rest on a given day. Obviously, once you've completely cleared your road cluster, or there's nothing left, you're probably going to have to dip into the world of Albion and look for another connection. At which point it starts to get a bit more complicated because you're going to have to remember your road home, or you're going to have to be prepared to just go to a town, sell everything that you've gathered, and then suicide back to your home binding, which of course is in your rest, because the roads may have collapsed, they may have changed. This will be difficult for people that want to bring out their Gucci stuff, because you need to make sure that you don't stray too far from home if you're planning on bringing stuff back with you to your hideout. If you just want to sell in town, that doesn't matter. You can bank your combat set and your gathering tools in that town, recall home, grab another set, and then you'll have sets placed all over the place. But you always need to have a way home, because if you lose that way home and there's no one to scout for you, as I tried on the test server, you could spend hours and hours and hours simply trying to find your base again. For people living outside the Roads of Avalon, like the current guilds and alliances living in the Outlands, Royals players who maybe aren't ready to step into this full time, the Roads of Avalon will be more like a procedurally generated exploration. You'll form up your group at the start of your play session, and you'll look for an entrance that supports your size, and you'll kind of just go in and you'll take whatever the roads give you, if that makes sense. First things first, so if I'm going in with my guild's son on a given day, we'll go in from our home tile in Gulch, we'll look for a portal, and we'll send in some scouts. some scouts with like mobility ganking gear. These guys will start to map the cluster that we're zoning into, and they'll look for the most important points of interest. T7 and T8 large resource spawns, large mob camps of large group size, you know, all of the really valuable stuff. And they'll say, right, you know, we've got good ore, we've got good stone, bring your gathering tools, bring your clearing gear, your PVE gear, and we'll just explore it as it presents itself. And the goal will always be to bring it back to Albion and back to our main headquarters in the real world. You know, we won't be looking for a hideout in the roads because that has no value to us, because we want our stuff either in our main town of Bridgewatch or in our main hideout in Gulch. So it's completely different, and we can't just flood the roads because they will only let in a few people at a time. And we'll look to control the most valuable tiles, farm them out, and bring all the stuff back. So the guilds inside will encounter guilds coming from outside just looking to farm, but they'll obviously have the home field advantage. They can respawn in the roads. They can come out of their rest hideouts and reinforce that way. Whereas the guilds coming from outside, they have to be very wary of their portals closing and not having their way home. Otherwise, they're going to have to look for a less optimal route. One of the final things I'm going to say will be the importance of alts and scouts in the roads of Avalon. If you're looking for a specific thing or a specific place in the roads of Avalon, having a scout on the inside is absolutely vital. Alt characters are going to be very popular for this, because think of it like somebody guiding you with map reading and you don't have any clue where you're going. You know, if you're looking for a specific place, they might not be able to find a specific entrance for you in your zone, but what they can do is tell you the closest place to go to get where you're going. So if I can't access the area I want from Gulch, I might have a guy inside telling me, okay, if you run down to Approach or Cliffs, there's an entrance there that will take you 2 roads away. Then you want to take the eastern road and then the northeastern road, and that will get you where you want to go. From the outside, relying on pure luck, it's completely impossible. With a scout on the inside, it's a lot more doable, but still could take time, because you don't decide where you're going. You don't decide what's available. The roads decide what's available. And that's why exploring the roads of Avalon and claiming the treasures and resources inside is going to be some of the most fun, small group content that Albion has ever seen. I hope you guys are excited. I'm excited. I'm going to be live from Sandbox's studios in Berlin when this expansion drops, and we'll be doing a ton of roads gathering. So I hope you're there on the live stream, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about the roads. Are you excited? Are you going to live in there? I'd love to hear from all of you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.